Welcome to the Black Girls Heal podcast, where we talk about changing unavailable relationship patterns, healing unresolved trauma, and building a healthy relationship with first you and then others. Every episode, we will talk about actionable advice that you can apply today to break unhealthy patterns and grow your self-worth. I'm Sheena Tubbs. Let's begin. Hey ladies, and welcome to the latest episode of Black Girls Heal. I'm so happy that you are joining me. So this episode is going to be a little bit different than my normal episodes. Instead of it being one that offers, okay, these are things to look out for, and here are some tools and things like that, this episode is going to be mostly reflections of my feelings post-election. I'm going to be revisiting something that I talked about in the episode titled Overcoming Our Unavailable Relationship with Whiteness, and just what that has to do with my experience and my watching what happened with the election and with some relationships with people who I thought were allies around the time of the election. So with that said, I want you to just know, for those of you who clicked on this saying, oh my gosh, I've been struggling with a lot of things regarding racial trauma post-election, that this episode is not going to be all encompassing. There are a lot of different elements of how trauma has been affecting us the last 4 years, as far as the onslaught of tragedies and traumas, distrust from the government, the heavy weight of being a person of color, that I'm not getting into this episode. However, I almost didn't post this episode actually, y'all, which is why if you're picking this up real time, it's coming out around midday on Wednesday versus 1 a.m. on Tuesday mornings, which is when I typically like to post it. And I almost didn't post it because I was like, do I really want to talk about this? Is this really the right platform? I know I needed to share it, but is this the right thing? But then I saw Dr. Joy from Therapy for Black Girls had a roundtable talking about post-election reflections and processing trauma. And that episode is up now. It'll be up whenever you listen to this in the future. They did an amazing job talking about this issue holistically. But I just want you to know that this is about feeling frustrated with white allies, or people who say that they were white allies, and hopefully giving voice to some frustration that maybe some of you have felt as well. So that is my very long intro to this week's episode. I hope that, again, you find it helpful, and let's go ahead and jump on in. Hello, ladies, and welcome to the latest episode of Black Girls Heal. I hope that this episode finds you well, finds you thriving, finds you looking for happiness and grabbing onto it. And in case you need some support with that, I hope that this episode brings you a little closer there. So this episode is one of my ones that was not expected. When it came to recording for this week, I've actually had a little bit of trouble, which is why if you're listening to this real time, it's not coming out on Tuesday like it usually does. It's coming out on a Wednesday. Because the topics that I wanted to talk about, I just didn't have the energy to do so. And the reason why that is because last week was the United States election. And so it has been a doozy, watching the up and down of how it started off, and then of course where it currently is now with President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. There's a lot of celebration. Trump is doing what he does, saying that the votes don't count when really it's a certain group of votes don't count, but the other ones they're okay with. But watching this election has been interesting for a lot of reasons. And so there has been so much celebration, especially with the appointment of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, which for sure is so awesome. You know, this is the second time in a row that I have personally voted for a Black woman. When Barack was first running for president, what actually made me vote for him was Michelle. From day one, I was like, if this woman is here, if she is by his side, if she is the one speaking and his advisor and, helping to lead us, then we're going to be all right. So I voted more for Michelle than Barack in the first election. And similarly for this election as well. We all have our different varying opinions about the candidates. But seeing that Kamala was going to be supporting Joe, President-elect Biden, like I know him. And, me and Joe, we go way back. But knowing that she was going to be there, I was like, all right, I'll get on board for this one as well. So that's been great, but I have really struggled because in the midst of all the celebration and the reshares, I have been so troubled. I have been actually pretty upset. And I was so upset because I thought, in light of the 4 years of just clear gaslighting, racial trauma, oppression, just constant injustice after injustice. There have been so many things that have happened over the 4 years that I had forgotten about them. I had literally, until I saw a news broadcast, and probably because it hasn't been talked about, but also because it hasn't directly affected my life in these last 4 years. But from the beginning, as far as the Muslim travel ban, of course, the children being kept in cages and ripped from their mother's arms, and no one at me about that because I actually worked in unaccompanied minor shelters for 4 years, and I was a counselor there, so I know how things are supposed to go, and I know what it's like to support undocumented children who come in alone, and what has been happening is not right at all. And it is different than the norm. It is different than how things were before Trump was in office. Watching white supremacist groups get heavy nods and accommodations, watching Native American population, like what happened with the pipeline, and Trump okaying just sacred land being ripped apart for this pipe to go through, like just getting out of the climate deal when literally half of the country is on fire and there are floods in areas when there are not supposed to be floods. It's just trauma after trauma, tragedy after tragedy, unhinged moment after unhinged moment. We've all been watching this person and his colleagues lie to us, abuse us, help one group over another. I thought at one point at the very beginning, after 55% of white women voted for Trump, and then realized, oh wait, he actually doesn't like women, and like showed up in droves at this, at the women's marches and all that stuff. Like I thought we all had an understanding. And so the night of the election, not once have I gotten emotional. Even the night that Trump won, I actually wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised because I had been watching just the energy around him, and I've been watching how the polls at that time weren't really capturing it. I watched how people who I knew, who I was like, you're for Trump, were for Trump, and I'm like, they're not talking about this. So once he was actually elected, that night I actually slept really well because like what I've been worried about happening for a year, like it finally occurred. Like totally my trauma response, totally me like waiting for the shoe to drop, like was picked up. And that was 2016, just to be clear, not this election. 2016, I expected Trump to win. No one else did, but I was like, there's energy here. So no emotion when that happened, more relief, because at least I knew what was going to happen, or I thought I knew what was going to happen. So when I watched the night of the election, all that to say, I've never been emotional, but I was watching the night of the election with my husband, and I was watching all these votes come in for Trump that first night, and just watching red across the country, I was so hurt. I was so hurt. I was so frustrated. I was so disappointed. I felt so betrayed. I felt so betrayed because all I could think of is all these people have watched how every single population group, every single population that's not a straight white man, because even white women have been getting laws that have been direct attacks on their rights. Rich, white, wealthy men, by the way, straight men, of course. Watching what's been happening with trans people in the military. I mean, just like all over the board. And I'm like, not only did all of these people vote the exact same way, they brought 6 million more of their friends who were just like, forget y'all, we don't care. And we are going to vote and empower on the way that's going to keep us in power as well. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. A couple days before, because I had already done cleansing of my friend group and timeline. And, as much as people, can say, social media isn't real, it might not be real, but there are definite norms and practices that we are building around it. Unfriending someone is a definite message, right? It is definitely more tangible and meaningful than it was a few years ago. The symbol has meat to it now. It has energy around it. And so a day or so before the election, I watched different people who I thought were allies talk about their support of this administration and him being reelected. And I was like, you literally, especially a couple people, you literally were there being one of the main people who were consoling me when I was devastated over recent murders of Black people. You've been someone who's been holding space and saying that you hear and that you listen. And then for you to vote in this way, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. And these people were all white women, by the way. And even to the point of where, because now I'm at a crossroads. Now I'm at a crossroads where I'm like, okay, I already cleansed my social group of people who I knew were not down for the cause. Now I have people who have smiled in my face and acted like they were, but they're not. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be quick with this unfriend feature, or am I going to reach out? And, I've thought about all the things that I teach here. I think about what I do for a living. I think about what I would tell somebody else to do. And I'm like, what feels best for me is to actually reach out and have a conversation. As much as I've talked about, on this podcast, about breaking our unavailable relationship with whiteness, about not trying to get people to change who are more fixed in their position and how they see the world, but to focus on what you can change and who are allies and everything. I'm like, these are people who I've considered almost like family. So I reached out to one person, and I say pretty much what I've already said so far here in this podcast. I tell them, it was so hurtful to see you post this, because you are someone who I have known to be more aware. And this person also happens to be one of my therapist mentors. She is someone who I know to be an expert in narcissism, who has always been super insightful at seeing abusive patterns from the jump. And so I say all this in the message. I say, this is what I've known you to be aware of, to see, This is how you have shown up for me, the things that you have told me before. And so I don't understand how with all of that, you can support this person. And I need to understand why. And it really was like a genuine, let me know why. Not that my feelings were going to change. Not that I was going to like be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But like, what? Like, I'm just flabbergasted. Help me understand what's going on. So her response was, thank you so much for reaching out. Your friendship means a lot to me. Would you like to let's talk about this? When can we get on a call? And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to have a conversation about this. So I tell her, I don't have the energy to have a conversation. And she's like, well, I'm with family right now. How about next week? Or would you not really want to have a conversation? And I'm like, honestly, I just wanted you to answer my question that I already wrote. Like, I just want to know why. And what she had said before I wrote that, she had said, well, I've had a lot of anxiety about feeling like I couldn't talk about my support for a party I've supported since George Wallace voted against segregation and hurt a lot of people of color. If you don't know who George Wallace is, he is, oh gosh, was he the governor of Alabama? It was one of the southern states, because I did a quick Google, and I'm not going to go and Google it again. But it was one of the governors or someone from a southern state who's Democratic, who, putting two and two together, voted against segregation and probably did a lot of other heinous things according to her understanding. So what she was telling me in short is, I'm a Republican and I went to be a Republican because Democrats have hurt people of color and I want to be in support of people of color. And I remember in the original post a day or so before the election, when she had shared how Trump should be reelected, someone had said something in the comments about him getting another chance. And she said, yeah, he's been great for the economy, and I really want to learn about his platinum plan for people of color. And y'all, I know that even if you've gotten this far listening to this podcast, Black people are not a monolith. I know 12% of Black men voted for Trump. I know 8% of Black women so far, according to the polls, that voted for Trump. So I know that there are varying opinions right now. I know people were not, cannot be for Biden and Kamala as well because of their history as well. But here's the thing. And I promise this is all going to be related to things that I've talked about before. I'm not just using this podcast to just talk about the election and not bring it back around to things I've talked about before. So thank you for staying with me so far. What her response to me was, it was reduced down to Republican Democrat, when this has never been about Republican versus Democrat. What is currently happening now, it's just not. And to reduce it to that tells me that you haven't been listening, that you have not been connecting the dots, that you have still been viewing all of this through your lens of privilege, of the true suffering and pain that people in this world have been going through for the last 4 years. For the last 4 years, to absolute terror, suffering, not to mention, financial impact of people losing their jobs, not having access to basic amenities, to people losing their family members that should not be passing away because of negligence from people who are power hungry and not listening to human rights, who are not valuing the life of other people. And then in a roundabout way, you tell me that this was because you care about people of color, when actively, present tense, you're seeing injustices over and over and over and over and over again for people of color, all disenfranchised people of all different intersections. And then you tell me about a governor from the 60s as if that's supposed to justify it. And then me knowing about your interest in the platinum plan. And by the way, low key with Trump and his platinum plan, even the name of the plan is, to me, maybe you disagree, but sounded pretty racist. Like the platinum plan, like platinum grills, like in the same way that you recruit rappers as if they're leaders of the black community. Like that's who we are. We like platinum, and we like, hip hop and rappers. Those are our leaders. Okay, gotcha. Good to know. And when I saw that response from her, and again, my premise in talking to her was like, what narcissism and personality disorders look like. You know probably more than anyone who assisted me with my training and learning about what it means to be a therapist. You know what it looks like when someone is unstable. And you should know what white supremacy looks like. I'm pretty sure you should know. And you still voted for that. So what was so hurtful this election was watching 76 million people so far. I am going to pause and look up the number. All right. So 76 is actually the number for Biden. Actually, it's closer to 77. But to watch 71,827,156 people vote against human rights. I don't care. We're not talking about taxation. We're not talking about whether or not your school system should have standardized tests, which, by the way, is based in systemic oppression as well. But that's not the focus I want to have for this podcast episode. We're not talking about whether or not corporations have a right to do whatever corporations do. Like, I don't know, y'all. We're talking about whether or not mothers and daughters and sons can stay together, whether or not people can live in this world without worrying about, if I go to Walmart, am I going to get shot? If I go to Target, am I going to get lynched? If I go inside my home, can someone come into my house and shoot me when I'm inside my home and not get prosecuted? We're talking about the right to live here. And almost 72 million people voted against that, and will say ridiculous things like, well, neither side is good. Both sides have their consequences. What? What are you saying? I don't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. Okay, so y'all, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because I've already had an episode, like I mentioned, about us ending our unavailable relationship with white supremacy, and us needing to come home to places and communities and action groups that are safe and see us as people. And I know that many people's racial trauma has been kicked up because you've had a similar experience that I've had. And just watching this happen, maybe having people in your close friend or family groups, having people deny your humanity and reducing your complaints to just whether or not you're red or blue, when I could care less what party you vote for. But maybe just believe that, like you supposedly said, which is not what it meant at all, but and we know that, but that all lives matter. But they don't, right? Only certain lives matter. And that is what you voted for. So I had 2 episodes that talked about racial trauma. And in one of those episodes, I talked about 5 steps that you can use as you're learning to just come home to yourself whenever this is triggered. And those steps were to confront, to cry, to celebrate, to create, and to contribute. So for you to confront what it is that is being disruptive to your sense of safety in the world. To look at it, to talk about it, to be honest about how it's affecting you, to not minimize it. That's something that I haven't taken my own advice the last 3 or 4 days, because I was like, I'm supposed to be celebrating this win. And of course, like, I can breathe easier. Like, to know that I don't have to worry about, God willing, who knows what, who knows what insanity is going to happen over the next, what is it, November, 2 months. I hope there's no insanity over the next 2 months, but to know that for the next 4 years, that there will be checks and balances for just basic ways that we know that the country should run. Like, I can't wait for us to get back to a time where it doesn't really, this is going to sound bad, and this is definitely going to sound reductionistic, so I apologize ahead of time, but in some ways it doesn't matter who the president is, because there's basic decorum that every president will follow. I cannot wait for systems to hopefully be rebuilt in a different way, because I think the holes have been exposed. But basically, I look forward to not having to worry about our leader emboldening groups who hate us to perpetrate against us. I've even just, the other day, one of my girlfriends sent me a surprise care package in the mail just to say that she loves me. Me and my husband fought about who was going to open the package, because neither one of us wanted to, because we knew we weren't expecting anything, and the box kind of looked suspicious. Why did we fight about that? Why were we scared to open the package? Well, because 2 years ago in Austin, in case you forgot, there was a serial domestic terrorist who was sending unmarked boxes to Black people around the city, just blowing them up for no reason. 3 people died, 6 people were injured. And if you Google it now, you will read how the police still refuse to call him a domestic terrorist. Meanwhile, we know the groups that are called domestic terrorists in this country, and the ones that are given a pass or told that they are very fine people, right? But I wanted to do this episode for anybody who was struggling like I've been struggling. I know that, this week is going to be full of really great celebratory podcasts, really great think pieces and articles. And I think we need that. I think our souls need that. But I think for those of us who are mourning, literally half of this country still not seeing us as human beings who deserve to be loved and seen and valued, even though it's not surprising, it's still hurtful. And I do think it's surprising. I'm not going to say that. I think for some people who have been in this work for a long time, who maybe come from families that have taught you this and shown you how things have worked, this isn't surprising for you. But for those of my ladies who are, especially those of you who grew up in settings where your closest friends, your closest loved ones for the longest time did not look like you, which I know is many of us, and you're still constantly having to grieve the difference in friend groups where you're having to return. I mean, I'm over here talking about friend groups because I'm working for myself now. But for those of you who had to return back to offices this week, who had to do online Zoom meetings, and for those of you who looked and you counted 10 white women in the room and you're like, 6 of y'all voted against all of us, you know, that is very real pain, and it's very hard to know who's safe, right? So I wanted to give voice to that, to let you know it's okay to feel those feelings. I want to also let you know that it's okay to be angry. I actually just finished the last mini workshop for our self-love intensive, which was our 4-month self-love program. And in this workshop, I was talking about emotions, and us learning how to focus on our emotions that actually cultivate self-love. And one of the skills that I was teaching them was about how to know if your emotions are justified or not, because sometimes we can get lost in our emotions and they can feel overwhelmed and we can feel really confused by them. And one of those emotions is anger, or was anger, that I taught about tonight. And what we looked at is, for us to know whether or not an emotion is justified, we have to make sure it fits the facts. And so there are actual qualities for each emotion to see if it actually fits the facts of the situation. So that way you can make an objective decision. Okay, am I overreacting, or does this actually make sense? And so for anger, there are 3 ways to know if anger fits the facts. And you'll hear me clicking in the background as I scroll down to it. So the first way that you know an anger fits the facts of a situation is if an important goal is blocked or a desired activity is interrupted or prevented. Anger also fits the facts if you or someone you care about is attacked or hurt by other people. And anger also makes sense and fits the facts if you or someone you care about is insulted or threatened by other people. And if the last 4 years haven't been these 3 points over and over and over again of basic rights that we need to live, to feel safe, to prosper, for things to be fair, for things to make sense, for us to not feel in danger of being attacked or hurt or killed, to not worry about being threatened or insulted by the leader of our country. Oh my God. I thought that when he was still rallying and he made fun of that disabled reporter, I was like, that's gotta be it. There have been so many moments in time that I was like, that has to be the line. Like, we all know that is wrong, right? But like, literally every community has had its moment multiple times. And so to have that happen and then see 72 million people vote for it to continue to happen, that's okay. It's just wild to me, but it makes sense to be angry. So with that said, your anger makes sense. It matters. And after you confront it, talk about it, cry, do whatever you need to do, I want you to make meaning from it. I want you to do whatever you feel called to do to move forward. Whether or not it is starting small and micro and just focusing on moving forward with your immediate family and creating the best life for those in your immediate circle, or is all the way to the other extreme of getting out and protesting and making sure that there's real systemic change and there's not another 4 years of people promising change but nothing's happening, right? And making sure you're actually voting in the midterm elections and not just for the president, because the reason why things also can't get passed is because of who's in office and making the decisions in Congress and actually putting your vote to work. And y'all, if I ever hear anybody say that your vote doesn't count when we literally watched this presidency happen because of the difference of a few thousand votes. A few thousand votes, y'all. You have to vote. You have to vote, and let 2020 not be lost on you and not be lost in those around you. But I want you to go out and make change, because the way that we heal from racial trauma is by taking our power back, by either celebrating, creating, or contributing out of the gifts that we have for others. So I hope that this was helpful for those who needed it. This might be the minority group of people, or this might be many of y'all. But that's what I got for you this week. If you're like, man, I need to know about those emotions, that sounds really helpful. Actually, for this Black Friday, and I'm counting Black Friday for the whole month, I am putting all of the lessons that I taught about the formula of self-love, which is looking at our actions, our thoughts, and our emotions, in this mini bundle called the Self-Love Focus. And so you're able to get it for a smaller price than I usually do my programs at, because it's Black Friday. So you can go to blackgirlsheal.org/Black Friday and go ahead and learn about anger and jealousy and envy and sadness and disgust and all of the emotions and fear, the things that keep us stuck, and also learn about cultivating healthier thoughts around self-love and healthier actions around self-love. That's all available for you there, along with some other bundles if you are interested as well. So again, that's all I got for you. Remember that we also have our end of year survey where you are free to fill it out to give me feedback on our podcast, on our newsletter, on our social media, on all the things, and be entered into a chance to win a $100 gift card to Amazon for the holidays. So that raffle is open from now until November 30th. And you can enter that by going to blackgirlsheal.org/2020. So that's it, y'all. I love you. Please make sure you are staying around people who are safe, who are healthy, who bring you life, and who are for real, down for the cause and down for your humanity. Take care of yourselves. Hey, so thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoy what you learned today, it doesn't have to stop here. Check out the Black Girls Heal website at blackgirlsheal.org for more resources to help you heal from intimacy disorders like love addiction and love avoidance. The best time to start or restart your healing journey is now. You can grab a free copy of our 5-step roadmap to heal love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation by going to blackgirlsheal.org/roadmap. And if you're on social media, feel free to follow us at Black Girls Heal on Instagram and Facebook.